Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Price Point. I'm Eddy Salas, Senior Vice President of Retail Strategy for DataWeave. And today we're going to be diving into a critical concept for retailers and brands alike, price zones. Understanding your competitors' price zones can allow you to tailor your pricing strategies accordingly. And today we're going to spend a little bit of time defining what price zones are and why they're important for you to understand. We got to start at the very beginning, though, and you've heard me say this in other episodes. It all starts with data. If you're only looking at competition in locations that are close to your stores, or you may be even just taking a look at one or two competitive locations as your baseline, you may be missing out on some vital information. Think of it like playing chess, but only focusing on a few squares. To outmaneuver competition, you really need to take a look at the entirety of the board. Said another way, if you really want to get a good understanding of competition, you've got to broaden that visibility. You've got to understand what's going on with their total network of stores and their total portfolio of items. Let's start with defining what price zones are. Think of a price zone as a grouping of stores that have the same managed price at an aggregate level. Now, this doesn't mean that every item in every store within that zone is going to be priced identically. There's always going to be item or category specific exceptions, but in total, you should see clear breaks where price changes across regions or markets. Price zones allow for this level of price management, which is often tailored to local competition. Let's start by assuming we have the data necessary to identify the competitive price zone. So we've already captured the entirety of their networks and their portfolios. There are various methods and analytical approaches that can help determine these zones. And let's just say that we taken one of those approaches and applied it to that data in order to identify the following price zone breakouts. As shown here, we've identified 4 distinct price zones for this retailer. We can further validate these zones by analyzing specific items and observing the price variations across different locations. But what if, for a particular item, you opted to sell the single price across all your stores? This could lead to missed opportunities. Your competitors, if they decided to break out their pricing into their 4 zones versus your single price point across all the stores. In certain instances, competition may be priced higher in certain markets, which means you're leaving money on the table. In other instances, competition may decide to get more aggressive in other markets, which means you're potentially losing out on price image because you're the high price operator in that area. Understanding these competitive zones enables for a more strategic and tailored go-to-market strategy for your stores. It's important to also understand that price zone identification happens at an aggregate level. In other words, stores within the same zone exhibit similar pricing behaviors, but exceptions are always going to exist. In our earlier example, we identified those 4 distinct price zones. However, as mentioned, that doesn't imply that every item within those zones will have varying prices. In some cases, a single item or even an entire category may have a standardized nationalized price. Conversely, you may encounter instances where certain items or categories are priced at a store-specific level. This is especially common in high commoditized categories like milk or eggs, or industries like fuel. Despite these exceptions, the goal is to identifying overarching pricing tendencies at the store level. Depending on the industry, the pricing variance can range from as little as 0.5% to as much as 5 to 10% when compared to the aggregate. And even though 0.5% doesn't seem like much, that could be worth multi-millions of dollars if you really identify what the zone's breakouts look like. It's crucial to also understand that price zone analysis isn't a one-time exercise. It requires ongoing monitoring, ideally on a weekly basis. The reason's simple. Even minor shifts in competitors' price zones can significantly impact your business. By keeping a close eye on these changes, you gain the ability to anticipate and proactively respond to market dynamics. This becomes particularly valuable when you detect shifts occurring in other markets, allowing you to plan ahead. Like I said, especially in those industries where 0.5% means a lot, if you see a competitor start moving some of their price zones by 0.5% to 1%, and if those are worth multi-millions of dollars, it's going to allow you to plan ahead and get ahead of that. If you foresee those potential price investments, getting ahead of those trends allows you to adjust your P&L accordingly. Alternatively, you may choose to implement immediate price changes to neutralize any impact from competition's new pricing strategy. You've essentially minimized the impact. You may be able to develop marketing around it, and essentially it becomes a moot point when competition comes in with that new pricing structure. The key is to know when to go on the offensive versus when to adopt a more reactive approach. Regular tracking of competitive price zones, especially from a time series perspective, equips you with this particular strategic advantage. Now, while we focus on identification of competitive price zones and their significance, it's also equally important to highlight that the competitive data offers far more value than the zone analysis. As mentioned, we're talking about potentially getting the entirety of the competitive locations across all their store network, along with all their store items. That's the baseline that you need in order to help identify what those price zone breakouts are. But what else can you use that information for? Well, think about minimum advertised price compliance. Monitoring whether your competitors are adhering to MAP agreements can help you ensure a level playing field and really avoid any type of price wars that could exist in order to erode margins. Assortment changes, competitive data can reveal which items or brands are being introduced or discontinued, and that helps you really be proactive and adjust your pricing and assortment strategies. You can also leverage this for item availability. This is particularly useful when you're facing supply chain challenges for certain products. If you notice that your competitors are constantly well stocked on items that you're struggling to source, you can leverage this information to push back on your vendors for better allocation. Beyond these, there are countless other valuable analysis reports that can be generated using this data. We'll dive into some of those use cases in future episodes, but for now, the key takeaway is that competitive data is incredibly dynamic and important and supports a wide range of strategic use cases. Now, to wrap things up, we've explored how to identify and monitor price zones can significantly enhance your pricing strategy by offering clarity on competitive positioning. This is also power in what you do with this information, using it not just for price zone management, but for broader applications like MAP compliance, assortment strategy, and ensuring product availability. Remember, price zones aren't static. Staying ahead means continuously monitoring shifts and proactively planning your response, whether that's protecting your margins or you're improving your overall price image. Competitive data is ever evolving, and when utilized effectively, it becomes a powerful catalyst for smarter, more strategic decisions. Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Price Point. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback or ideas for future topics, so feel free to reach out and connect with me anytime. And with that, I'm Eddy Salas, and I look forward to continuing the conversation on The Price Point.